Landry.Audio. Listen, like, and subscribe. Peter Tägtgren, Swedish death metal legend known for Hypocrisy, Pain, and until fairly recently, Lindemann. He's produced a lot of the records that I listen to through his Abyss recording studio in Sweden. Peter's promoting Hypocrisy's new album, Worship, coming out in a couple months, and he's been good enough to speak with us. I am in Australia, and he's in Sweden. So how are things on that side of the planet this morning?
Hey, good morning. How it is? Well, it's gray and it's autumn time, so it's getting cold and gray, and 6 months of hating life even more.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Canada, so we kind of effectively by the first week of September, we deemed summer was done and dusted. Is it roughly the same over there?
Yeah, I think we have the same kind of four seasons. It's pretty much the same as in Canada.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So look, we're going to talk about your new album. I got a lot of questions to ask you. It's so cool to speak with guys like you who I've grown up listening to. So first of all, new album's coming out. Tell us about the media that you've been doing with it. I mean, I think it's 8 years in between records, which sort of begs the question, have there been songs on the back burner? Did you do this in a few months? Did Nuclear Blast tell you that, you've got a record due for us? What was the process to get to this point?
I don't know. We never really stopped touring with the End of Disclosure album. We did a couple of American tours. We went to Australia for the first time a couple of years ago. We did Europe, I don't know how many times, and Japan, and so it just kept on going and going, and we kind of never stopped. And plus, I had Pain coming out 2016, so I had to push that stuff, and it never really stopped. And you had Lindemann before and after Pain album and tours as well. So 8 years goes really fast when you're busy.
And with this album coming out, I mean, we're sort of in a really unique position with all these things going through COVID. I'm told Sweden hasn't really gone down through the pathway of hard lockdowns that we've had here. Have you guys been relatively free over there during this time period?
Yeah, but per capita, there's a lot of people died. If you compare in per capita. So I don't know what this government is doing, if they did right or wrong. I'm just hoping that it will resolve this madness.
And I assume that you're speaking with the label Nuclear Blast about how you're going to get on the road and promote it. What sort of conversations are you having, like, in terms of trying to book a tour on this? Like, even here in Australia, different states are in different states of lockdown. How do you try to book or schedule something like this at the moment?
Well, we had this European tour booked for October and November now, and we never went out and announced it because we saw in August, September, it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. So it's a big financial risk, to go out on tour and all suddenly one city has one rule: you can't do this, you can't do that, or another one just shut it down, so you can't do it at all. And if you have a lot of people on your payroll, it's going to hurt you really bad. So we just said, let's just promote this album the whole year now, and then in spring we have American dates, or actually North American dates. So during the summer, hopefully some European festivals, and then September, October, try to go to, like, for example, Australia and New Zealand and Japan, go all the way up, and also do South America and Europe proper tour. So I think next year is for touring, and I hope not all the venues are gone, because a lot of bands postponed all the time, so there might be like 2 or 3 bands booked on the same venue, just in case one drops out, the other one gets it. And so it's going to be a tough time, but I really hope we will figure it out.
I've always wondered for bands like yourself, when you're good enough to come down and visit us down here in, like, Australia and New Zealand, normally you tend to tour sort of 3, 4, 5 cities. Do you bring all your gear down, or do you hire gear when you're down here? Because it seems like a big thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you get drums where you go to. you know, when you fly in, do flying gigs, so you send them all the requests you need to make the show happening. So usually you bring your guitars, your amps, and things. It depends what kind of amps and stuff. I mean, we go a lot of things through computers, and you know, with programmed echoes and stuff like that for guitars when there's melodies and things like that. So we kind of have a setup for fly-in gears, and then you request the rest at the venue, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. I think you've been with Nuclear Blast for the majority of your career. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
30 years.
30
Well,
years.
actually 29 years right now, but it will be 30 beginning of next year.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
When you get to this point now, when you're releasing an album, like I guess it's not new, but like I remember a time when you have to go down to the record store and go out and physically buy a copy of the album.
Yeah.
What sort of becomes the expectation from a record label now? What are they hoping to do with the album when you've got illegal downloading, Spotify, YouTube? I know at least metal fans, generally speaking, are still an audience that will buy physical copies or the limited editions. Do they still entirely rely on that, or what sort of becomes the model for success these days?
Well, we did a box set that we released at the same time as the Chemical Horror video, and a lot of vinyls and stuff like that, and everything sold out just like that. So I don't know what they're gonna do. I think they managed to pull out a few more vinyls. It should be on our homepage, and other than that, I don't know. I think they go for clicks, you know, on YouTube or clicks on the digital platforms. I really have no clue, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm really interested to talk about this part with you. Going back and taking a look again at some of this, you've kind of been involved in all of the major subgenres that hit and became big through like the late 80s into the mid 90s. It seems like you were there for all of it. So from your emigrating to the US, and I think you were there from 88 to 90, which is really when the traditional death metal sound would have hit. And then I believe that you went back to Sweden, and Sweden develops both, the Stockholm and the Gothenburg sound, while next door.
No. I went back in 91 to Sweden to start a death metal band, because my friend owned a studio, a very small studio, you know. And for me, it was easier. I can go in and play drums, and then I can put on guitars and then bass, blah, 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 you know. And the music has nothing to do with any of that genre. It was mainly the American style, because I grew up in Florida, and with a bunch of bands that later became pretty big. So, I mean, for me, it was incredible to be there, to see how the death metal came out from America at that time. And for me, that was the most exciting thing, the American way of the riffing and stuff. The first album was really inspired for me a lot by first Morbid Angel or first D-side album, you know, and of course the older stuff that I was into, like Celtic Frost and Possessed and things like that was in the earlier 80s, so to say. So I never had any sound like Gothenburg or Stockholm. I think Entombed, Left Hand Path was a very important album as well for Hypocrisy to get influenced by, but not by the sound or anything like that. It's just like, it was a hell of a fucking album and a hell of a production at that time. So for us, it's Hypocrisy has been more into the American ways, to be honest, you know.
Sorry, maybe I wasn't making it clear. I was talking more about sort of being involved in those scenes at the time. Do you?
Oh yeah.
Kind of.
No, but
remember?
we were not even involved in these scenes, because where Hypocrisy comes from, it's like, I don't know, hillbilly town. You know, there is nobody around, and there was not really any tape trading with other bands. Or I didn't look around seeing what was going on, really, to be honest. Yeah,
so it was kind of done independently of all these other things going on around you.
Yeah, definitely. I just wrote what I had with me. Of course, then you start buying CDs when you get back to Sweden, and more bands came out and shit. So it was just a cool thing, I would say. A good period in life for me. I was very inspired.
Okay. And I don't know when you went back or what you made that decision, but like when I think of guys like Devin Townsend or Eric
Yeah,
Rutan, they're both they're incredible musicians, but it
yeah, yeah,
almost seems like some of this seemed to be picked up with the fact that they opted to go and create their own studios as well. Did you
yeah.
did you want to go do that initially? I think I was in preparation for this. I was watching, I think the Hypocrisy biography DVD, and you were complaining about how poorly the first album turned out because I think when you recorded,
Yeah.
the producers had not heard heavy metal before. Was that, I guess, a catalyst for trying to do something yourself?
Yeah, that was the third album, actually, the Fourth Dimension. I mean, the two first albums we recorded in my friend's studio that I was talking about, that I wanted to go back home to create my
Okay.
music in. And I helped him doing some demos for local bands, and he gave me some free times to record my stuff. So after two albums in that studio, we planned on the third one, and we felt that we had some wind in the sails, so to say. So we wanted to go big. So we went to a major studio in Stockholm. It's called Park Studio. I think there's a lot of bands that that's been recording there, Europe and things like that, and more
Yeah.
commercial and
Commercial
softer
bands.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so we had this engineer that had no fucking clue, and the album turned out really terrible in sounding wise. It sounds really weird. And but at the same time as we were there, I bought the studio from my friend, because he was going to close down the studio, and that's really how I started to get more niched into it. Like I said, I did some demos before with other bands, and it was nothing really that I wanted to open a studio for other people. It was mainly just for my band. It would be a good tool to get good productions and so on. But it wasn't as easy as I thought, because I think the first album we did in Abyss was Abducted, and I think I re-recorded it like 3 times, threw away like 3-4 songs every time, and writing new ones. So in the end, it was a lot of effort, but I think it came out really good, and it's still a milestone today, in the
Mm.
sound and the songs and everything. Yeah. So I
How
think
do you
that's where
think?
we really niched our own sound and our own style.
Mm. And how do you think you sort of became, the guy? Like I don't have the Wikipedia page in front of me, but from like
Yeah,
Flesh Crawl Grave, even like early Sabaton, like
yeah,
everyone's been through your doors effectively of this sort of a Scandinavian sound to a degree.
yeah. I don't know. Maybe they heard something I recorded, and then people ask, like, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And it grows a little bit more and more, and then all suddenly, more famous bands takes a notice of you, and then it grows a little bit more. And I think that's how it was. What people heard that I did in the mid 90s kind of steered them to my studio, I guess.
Cool.
So yeah, yeah, I'm really happy with all the bands I recorded, because I mean, there's been a lot of bands coming and going,
Hmm.
as you said, and I always keep an eye on everybody to see how they doing nowadays, and it's great to see their career just bloom, most of them.
Yeah, indeed. What do you think about the way that, again, I'm not a musician, so I'm just looking on the
Mm.
outside in, but I remember going back like a decade ago, and everyone talking about recording from home and Pro Tools, and especially with this lockdown,
Yeah,
it seems like a lot of bands are recording, their parts independently and then mixing them. Do,
yeah,
do you think, do you need to be in a studio anymore to get that full sound, or can these really be done, independently on one's computer?
yeah. Like I said, not I didn't say to you, but I said to a lot of other people, there's a lot of laptop productions coming out, and you can really tell, because it's very stiff and very cut down, like really uh, perfectionized, really
Okay.
cutting everything, so it sounds like machines, kind of thing. I mean, everybody has the right to do it. I think computer is really a good, helpful tool that came around, and it helps a lot. The way I do it is that I record everything through analog stuff, and then I run it into my computer, and then when I mix the stuff, I run it through analog stuff again and put it in. For me, it gives more heart and more human feeling to it. It doesn't get so stiff. With Pain, it's a different thing because it's more industrial kind of music, and it should be very stiff and cut up and sterilized kind of thing, you know. But for Hypocrisy, I think you need a little bit more of a round sound and a little bit more of a heart in there, you know.
It definitely, Hypocrisy certainly has a much fuller sound, is almost the way that I can describe it, comparatively to I guess a lot of, I guess, thrashier metal that I would listen to in that regard.
Yeah.
Do you think, how do you think that the heavy metal genre has changed? And again, I'm asking your perspective as someone who's been around from, you know, the early stage and have seen all these sort of developments and subgenres come through.
Yeah, I mean, it's about generations, you know. In the 80s, death metal sounded in a certain way. If you listen to death metal today, it sounds a little bit different. Because it's a new generation and new ideas and fresh ideas from a younger generation when they write music. And I mean, just to compare, like in the 80s as well, you had the black metal with the Venom, Possessed, Hellhammer, all these bands. And then you listen to the black metal in the 90s, like Dimmu Borgir, Cradle of Filth, Immortal and stuff, and you see it slightly changed. That's another generation of black metal, and then it goes on and on, you know, with all these different genres of metal. So I think it's just a natural development.
Yeah, it seems, at least to my ears, that there's very little kind of traditional death metal. It seems to all moved into deathcore probably over the last decade or so, which is kind of taken its own genre.
Yeah, well, you know, it goes in different turns, you know. So it's not, I don't see anything wrong with it, you know. I'm just more a fan of end of 80s, early 90s death metal, because I guess I grew up on that and that was how I saw it, you know. So it's just about generations and age, I think, you know. It's still good that it develops.
One of the things that I've noticed about musicians as they get older, specifically like in our genre of music that we listen to, is oftentimes it seems that they, you know, they mature as listeners. And it doesn't seem that they kind of follow what's going on anymore, and they get more inclined to listen to other types of music. Do you still enjoy heavy and death style music these days?
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure. I mean, from the beginning, I was brought up on the Purple, Black Sabbath, Beatles, Rolling Stones, and things like that, because I was born 1970, so I'm old. So I mean, that's what I got fed in the beginning, and then in the 80s, you know, more heavier bands came out, like Iron Maiden, Venom, and things like that. You know, so it changed a little bit to more heavy stuff, and I followed that genre, and then it got even more heavy, so I followed that genre. So it's, for me, it was just a development, just following whatever was brutal at the time.
Yeah, fair enough. There seemed to be a noticeable change in Hypocrisy sound, and I, from around the early 2000s, I would have been in my late teens. So it's really Catch 22 that was the album that got me into the band. So I've never considered Hypocrisy like a traditional death metal band, I guess, that you might have been seen from as before. But was there, you know, was there a conscious choice, or what was the decision to kind of evolve and adapt into that new sound?
Good question. I mean, the two first albums are death metal for sure, you know, and then the third one, I started to screw around with keyboards and melodies and making slow, epic songs and things like that. I mean, we had one very heavy song on the second album as well, but I mean, in general, it just got a little bit wider. I think when you start your career by making albums, usually you're influenced by something else. Like I said, I was influenced by Morbid Angel and Deicide and Entombed, but we didn't sound like them, but we tried to create our own version of it, you know. And then the later you start writing, I think you start trusting yourself and you start writing in a little bit different way, and it's just a natural thing. And that's what we did up to 2002. We were just developing newer sound and for us and newer ways of playing and things like that. And 2002, I was really pissed and just hating life. So the album became very punkish and very in your face, and the people were really shocked, and some people were really hating it, you know. And but now, as time went by, a lot of people say Catch 22 was a fresh wind in the air, you know, that we did. And I think all these bands needs to do some crazy stuff that has a career for 20 or 30 years. I mean, look at Metallica. They did Load and Reload that really doesn't feel like Metallica, you know, and then they came back a little bit to what they used to do. And same with Slayer. They start tuning down the guitars and becoming more
7 strings.
You know, everybody needs to have this outlet to do these things. I think it's good for your development as a songwriter or as a band. You know, all of us has to do these things and do like an experiment kind of album kind of thing and just go with the flow and see what happens. You know, so 2002 was people were kind of, holy shit, what the fuck is this? You know, either they liked it or they hated it. So nowadays they like it because now they're used to it.
Well, there's a couple places I'd like to go with that. But first of all, can I ask you what was going on at that point in time? You said that, you know, you were really pissed off and things weren't going well. What were some of the issues that you were facing?
I was pissed at everybody, you know, labels and shit like that. I didn't think they did a good enough job and shit like that. And started getting tired and pissed of press people, you know, kissing my ass and shit like that. And then you read something different, you know. So it was this two-faced kind of thing that really drove me into write lyrics like "Don't Judge Me" and "Public Puppet" and things like that, you know. So, and also the attitude in the music was a little bit different. It was more punkish. And the sound was punkish. I think Lars Ulrich stole the snare there for St. Anger, but he tweaked it even more.
Right.
You know,
it's interesting what you said about I guess artists willingly changing their sound to stay interested. But you know, the examples that you mentioned, like if you talk about Metallica's St. Anger, you know, there's the snare drum. They go back to 9-minute long songs. There's no guitar solos on it. You know, if you want to talk about Slayer and what is it? It's Diabolus in Musica, I think they go a little bit slower with them. Do you think you can veer off too far off that cliff? Because now 15 years later, whatever it is, you can clearly tell that those songs pocket like into the new metal genre, kind of almost like the way, you know, a lot like Priest with Turbo Lover and that sort of stuff. It almost goes too far, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not the right person to answer that, but I mean, for me, it was weird. I don't know what the fans thought. Well, I do, but I mean, like I said, I think it's a natural cause for the band to develop, to ventilate with different kinds of stuff, to try different things and dare to do it, and then come back again, you know, to go like, okay, yeah, now I've done this, so let's go back to what we do best.
You've mentioned them a few times, and I'd love to talk about them for a few minutes. Entombed, they probably just like yourself, they're one of my favorite bands, and I really enjoyed their move from death metal into death and roll. I thought between sort of, you know, Wolverine Blues, Uprising, Shoot Straight, and then returning back to Morningstar, I really love those albums. LG Petrov passed away not too long ago. Were you good friends with him, or do you have sort of stories about hanging out with those boys?
Yeah, I mean, when I was working on my first demo, I realized I couldn't sing death metal, so I had a contact with the LG in '91 and stuff. We talked a lot, and he actually was gonna come up and put vocals on for the weekend, you know, for my demo. So a couple of days before, he called like, "Hey, sorry, I'm back with Entombed again. I have to go with them." And I was like, "Ah, fuck it," because I mean, the way he sings, I really enjoy it. I also like the style he was singing, you know, on the more rock and rollish albums and stuff. You know, he sounds fucking angry. You know, I really love his attitude in the vocals, and he was a great fucking guy. You know, he was pure underground dude. hanging with everybody, drinking beer with everybody. It was very social, so I really miss it.
I told you he was about a 24/7 sort of beer in hand sort of guy.
Yeah, exactly. And just metal all the way.
Yeah, right. Do you know much about what actually happened between them? From my understanding, Alex and a couple of the others weren't really interested in recording or touring regularly, and that sort of led to the split off, because between traditional Entombed and Entombed AD, well, depending upon who you ask, are sort of the same band, that they clearly went off to a different path and kind of returned to a much more sort of straightforward traditional death metal sound.
Yeah. I can't comment because I really don't know the story behind all this. So, I say nothing. I have no clue.
Fair enough. So Hypocrisy as well. One of the other changes I mentioned is sort of a more expansive and I guess progressive sound as well. Is that I began noticing, this kind of came up beyond Catch-22, is a little bit more of this fascination with UFOs and the paranormal. Do you want to just sort of take me through the journey of again, the traditional upside down crosses death metal band into a more expansive sound, and then visually changing into something else again?
Yeah. I mean, the two first albums, I wrote pretty much most of the lyrics on the first album, because the songs were already done before Massa, our singer at that time, before he was even in the band. So the songs were really done there. On the second album, he took it to the extreme with his lyrics. So on the third album, since it was me singing, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to get into, dimensions, the more unnatural stuff. Almost like ghostly stuff, and also of course about extraterrestrial kind of thoughts. So on Abducted album, there was a lot of songs that it's just my theories, like Roswell 47. At that time nobody knew what the hell is Roswell, and it's a small fucking town in New Mexico.
It is,
and for me that UFO incident really stuck out. So I felt I needed to write a story about it, and then just as it goes on, the lyrics get more crazier and more weird, to put it in that way. And it was just like a novel writer just starting to space out and write about things that you think could be, and it's still the same thing today. What could be if these kind of theories I like, and nowadays it's pretty much what I do all day long is watch news, listening to podcasts with people talking about strange things, and I just eat all the infos I can get all day long, because that's the only thing I think is interesting right now. So the lyrics becomes after that,
So what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm in the same boat lately. Joe Rogan has been having a lot of these guests on, Travis Walton in the UFO abduction, and now we've got the declassification of all these documents that are now coming out in the United States. Just what are your thoughts? Do you buy into all of it? Do you think it's potentially military technology?
Yeah, a lot of it is military, definitely.
Yeah.
I think 99% is man-made, but I do think they have technology that they recovered either from the past, from the ancient time. I think there's been something coming around to our solar system every 1,000 years or every 10,000 years or whatever.
Right.
And I think these people really planted us here. If you look at the cover, this is what I think, to be honest.
Well, I was going to ask how this ties in with Little Green Men, which are kind of part of the look and feel of Hypocrisy now, if you don't really believe in alien spacecraft, I guess, being here all the time.
So my theory is just my theory, how I see things. And with worship is really about worshiping. I mean, we're so into worshiping things. We worship people on YouTubers. We worship everything, You know, anything from movie stars to rock stars to blah blah blah, and we worship our drugs because that's the only safety we have. So for me, with this cover, I just wanted people to worship the crosses. You know, these are the people that put us on Earth 60,000 years ago, and now they're back to collect and to put us against the wall and see what the fuck we're doing with our stupid planet. You know, we're trying to kill ourselves, we try to kill everybody else, and so on. I mean, it's also theories with the Mayan people that just disappeared like that. Where the fuck did they go? I think they came and collected them, and then, you know, let's see what the new human beings can do, you know.
Like,
and
you mean took them away?
There is no Mayan people anymore anywhere. They just vanish. They were very smart people, and I think that's the same thing as what we're going through now. The last 150 years, I think we our DNA got altered, you know, so we got a little bit smarter. Because if you see from 60,000 years, we didn't do much up till 150 years ago, when we all suddenly just started to explode with the new inventions and things like that. So all suddenly we're here today, and I think they're getting scared that we're getting too smart so we can get out of our own solar system, and I don't think they want us there, because we will mess it up, all of it.
Oh, that's pretty interesting, because my understanding of that sort of time period is that the discovery of fire was the big thing, and learning how to cook meat. And I don't know too much about it, but the ability to change from eating raw meat into cooking it unleashed further proteins, which was allowed us the development of brain power. And I think that was kind of like one of the major, I guess, big blocks to allow us to advance.
I don't know. It's just my theory. I don't think so. You know,
Well, it's
you
funny
can eat as much protein you want. Just send it over to all the politicians. I don't think they're going to get smarter. So
it's funny that you mentioned that too, because I'm in a city called Newcastle, which is about 2 hours north of Sydney, and in between us we've got a place called the Central Coast, so sort of in between those two areas. And I've been over here for about 15 years, so it's like, you know, I know a lot, but you still kind of learn things day to day. And I only recently found out that there are some ancient hieroglyphs that exist on the Central Coast that have like Egyptian text on them that date back to at least about 5,000 years ago, that no one can explain how they would have gotten over here. But it doesn't seem to be a very well-known thing. It's just the Central Coast hieroglyphs here.
I know, and there are everywhere on Earth, you know. So who did them, and why did they do them? You know, I think it could be the people that lived at that time, that had that kind of writings, like we write our stuff today. They did it in hieroglyphs, and maybe they developed the hieroglyphs themselves, or maybe someone taught them that. I don't know.
So it's quite interesting, though. So you think all the media attention around UFOs today, you think that's actually military technology, but once every 5,000 to 10,000 years, you reckon they come down and kind of reorganize the planet as they see fit?
Both yes and no. I think, like I said, with all these things that people see in the sky, I think it's definitely a lot of military stuff on that. And I think the only reason why governments doesn't come out with saying like, yeah, we have alien technology and blah, 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 is because then they have to share it with people, you know, the technology. And that's not good for a country who's really are high keen on you know, defense systems and so on and so what, you know. They don't want to share anything with you. Even if the world is collapsing and we're still doing these things with fossil fuels and shit like that, when we could actually maybe generate electricity out of nothing. So that's one major big problem, I can tell you right there, why they don't say anything. And I think maybe there's something coming around. You never know. If they come from a different dimension, you can go through very fast. If you bend the time and space, you can go straight instead of going like this. I mean, there's a lot of theories. you can sit all day and just think about things, you know.
And so does that extend anywhere further into other elements? Like, I think, you know, are you talking like ghosts and Bigfoot and other cryptids and that sort of thing that might exist these days?
I really don't know. Last night I was actually listening to this podcast about Bigfoot, but I still don't get it, you know. It's starting to get interesting, but I'm not really hooked on, to be honest. I do believe that there's things coming and going, and not, like I said, like thousands of years in between, but I think it might come and go a little bit sooner than you think in between the intervals. So
have you heard anything
it's just
about...
my thought, my theory, you know.
I was gonna say, have you heard anything about that Skinwalker Ranch that exists in the US, where they talk about all that sort of stuff? What do you reckon
There's
about
something in the ground. There's very magnetic area there, and they see a lot of weird shit, even more like mixed between wolves and huge wolves or whatever, you know, and also light sounds. It's like a ghost town, you know. Bigelow used to own that. He's a huge scientist guy. Yeah, but anyhow, he didn't handle it anymore. He bought it because he heard it was, you know,
the billionaire guy who bought it. Yeah, and he put all those scientists on it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and they couldn't figure it out, and I think he sold it, and now they have these documentaries on Discovery Channel and things like that. New people are trying to figure it out, but it seems like they can't figure it out. It's kind of strange.
So does that scare you more than that if what you presumed might have been presumed would have been UFOs might actually be military technology? Like, is that not potentially a little bit scary if you find out that all this craft that can bend space and time is actually, you know, China and the US?
I guess it's a natural development since the 40s and 30s. I don't know. I mean, I guess they have to do what they have to do. You know, somehow they got in touch with the technology. I mean, they think lead and optic fibers and things like that comes from the Roswell crash, and that's how they develop it there. There's, like I said, something happened over the last 150 to 200 years that our IQ and our brain just develop a lot. And why all suddenly? I have no clue.
Fair enough. We're starting to get towards the end of our chat. I got to ask you this. Other people have asked you this already, and I know you've been hesitant to give an answer about it. But you know, I really enjoyed the Lindemann project, and I know that you decided to walk away from it last year. And I think you said, you know, it wasn't really for me anymore. And you know, there were some rumblings that possibly Till was, you know, maybe a bit of a difficult guy to work with. But I was just wondering if there's, because you've not publicly said anything. I was just wondering if you could give us a bit of an insight into why it doesn't really interest you anymore. Not
really. I can just tell you this. It was great when it was, and it wasn't great when it wasn't. Put it that way. So, I mean, we had a dynamite chemistry. You know, we just had to look at each other, and then we started writing music. It was that easy. Yeah. The easiest part was the studio work. You know, we could have spit out hundreds of songs every year because we had so many ideas and we really clicked. So yeah, it's sad. I mean, we could have been one of the biggest bands in the world if we kept on going. I'll tell you that. It was insane.
I thought it was incredibly catchy, and you guys seem to do very, very well in Russia over there with the band.
Russia was really good. Europe was good. Everywhere was good.
And you're surprisingly pretty funny in those music videos without saying anything.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was taking care of the music, he was taking care of the image, and in between there we helped each other, kind of, you know.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So Peter, before we wrap up with you today, what again, because you've been around the scene for so long, you know, there's probably going to be a lot of kids that might be like 15, 20 listening to this. Take us through, you know, maybe 10 albums that you think are like essential listening between, you know, the periods that you've talked a lot about these bands already, but why don't you give people some guidance on what they should be listening to?
Oh shit, I'm not the right person for that. You're talking about just metal, death metal?
Yeah, well, I mean, you just during this interview, you mentioned, you know, Possessed, Entombed multiple times.
Yeah.
I think Malevolent Creation is who you originally were working with at the time.
I wasn't
there's gotta
working.
be
We
some
were just friends.
friends. Okay.
Sometimes I jumped in, played drums when their drummer didn't show up for practice and things like that. But yeah, you have a lot of bands. I don't know where to start. For me, the end of the 80s was really the most exciting thing. Unfortunately, when Hypocrisy came out, the whole death metal scene was going down. So I'm really happy that we're still around. So, I mean, I would just go out on Google and see what came up between, I don't know, 81 to 91.
Right.
In the heavier genre, whatever was heavy in the 80s. It's really hard for me to say what people should listen to,
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe they should listen to new stuff instead of old stuff. I really don't know.
All right. And last question before we wrap up then, in terms of Hypocrisy and the discography, not the best album, because I know artists being hate ask the question, what is the best album? But what album sort of sticks out to you as a particular key moment in time that you're fond of?
With Hypocrisy?
Yes.
Oh God, that's a good question. I think Abducted was sticking out. I think Catch-22 was sticking out. I think Virus was sticking out, and I think the new albums will stick out too. And they all stick out in different kind of ways.
And so was it
some for good, some for
breaking
bad.
out? What was happening at that point?
What's that? How do you mean?
What made it memorable for you?
Because it shook the scene a little bit. I think the metal scene that we were in. When Abducted came out, people were like, "Whoa!" It was something different, and it was very, very polished, and it made a difference for us. Put it that way. And like I told you about Catch-22, it also made a difference, but in a different way. People went like, "What the fuck?" Or it put, let's put it like this: it put rings on the water.
Fair enough.
Virus, I thought was also really good. We got a new drummer, so I was thinking different when I was writing music, because the first song I wrote was Warpath, because I knew I had a drummer that can really blast and play fast double bass. And there was more contribution from the other members at that time as well. So the style of the album became a little bit different, but still very good, I think. And now with the new album, I think you should check it out, because it's all that you need if you're a Hypocrisy fan.
Cool. Well, the album's called Worship. I think it's due to drop in late November.
26.
So, cool. So look, thanks for your time. It's been really cool. And I appreciate you letting me ask all these questions. That it's very interesting. I'm getting to talk to people that I've listened to for 20, 25 years now. So there's a lot of kind of background questions that I've always wondered.
I know you got a good job.
All right, all the best, and who knows, maybe I'll get a chance to talk to you on the next release.
Thank you for your support, man. Have a good one. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.